All right, like you heard at the top, joining me here today, actually not joining me first time, because if you've checked out Trivia Showdown over the summer, I've done a podcast with this guy. We actually have done it home and home now, I guess, officially, right? Because over there on One and Done, I hung out with you and John, talked ACC in the preseason. But joining me again now, actually talking basketball on the Two Pointers podcast, is Steven Bagell. Got that right. I know I did. We corrected it. How are you, my friend? Introduce yourself. Let people know where they can find your work.
I'm doing well, Trevor. Thanks for having me on. So, as Trevor just introed, we being myself and my co-host John Simpson, we just started earlier this college basketball offseason, the One and Done College Basketball Podcast. We've already had some pretty cool interviews with guys like Baylor point guard Ray J. Dennis, Oakland forward Trey Townsend, Ole Miss assistant coach Wes Flanagan, Utah State point guard Darius Brown, who's currently leading the nation in assists. And we anticipate doing some more, pretty cool interviews, giving you guys some insight in terms of some college basketball. And I've also now, I believe I'm on my third season covering the NBA for the Bird Rights podcast, which is a NBA front office podcast where I break down the salary cap, why teams do what they do in terms of the business aspect of the league. So you could check that out. I just did an emergency episode yesterday with Chris LeBron for the OG Anunoby trade to the Knicks. Yeah. So be on the lookout for something like that. I'm also writing for The Lead, where I just released basically a draft philosophy article in terms of, seniors basically either being undervalued, not even just seniors, but upperclassmen in college in general, being undervalued, and, cite so many examples of that. And yeah, so go check out my work there. And yeah, Trevor, again, thanks for having me.
Of course, yeah. Look, the open that will be in this is going to be, I guess maybe it's open, maybe it's after this, but is going to be some just NBA stuff that I need to catch myself up on. I won't necessarily do New Year's resolutions probably, but a lot of really good stuff there. I can't wait to listen to the Chris LeBron stuff. I had him on a few months ago, and I love Chris. He's a character, and he definitely loves the Knicks more than just about anybody I know. So I know that'll be interesting. And then obviously the front office side of things, like, in the next month and a half, the NBA is going to be cranked up to 11 with that stuff with the trade deadline. So it'll be really, really fun. All right. So I do this. I think this is now 3 years doing this one. New Year's resolutions for college basketball teams. A couple of last year's for context. I mentioned the Mountain West just winning a meaningful game, and that was in December of last year. And the Mountain West was just a little late. Technically, it's in this year, I guess, right? They ended up pulling it off by the end of December, and eventually might be a 5 or 6 bid league. But my track record of these is not exactly the greatest. So I want to start with whatever you have as your most confident or whatever. But for those that have not listened to this before, just something. It doesn't have to be necessarily a New Year's resolution that is attainable, but an example of this team is shooting 20% from three. A simple, stupid one would be, well, if Michigan State wants to win more games, they need to shoot 35% or more from three, or whatever it is, right? It could be something dumb like that, but it could be any league, any player, any coach. Last year, I think with Ryan Hammer, we did, he brought up Dariq Whitehead having a meaningful game, and I was like, no way, I had that one as well. How about score more than 15 in a game? And he never did in a college game. I think he had 14 a couple of times, but yeah, so meaningful, whatever you'd like it to be. What is your first college basketball New Year's resolution?
Trevor, it's funny that you just brought up the Mountain West, because that actually pertains to my first New Year's resolution. I guess this is technically cheating because I have 2 written down here. But basically, it's not only that the Mountain West is a 5-bid league this year in the March Madness, but also that New Mexico makes the tournament. And specifically, I want to focus on New Mexico because John and I always talk about on the podcast how important, guard play is in March Madness. And they have, I'm not going to say the best backcourt in the country, New Mexico, but between Donovan Dent, Jamal Mashburn Jr., and Jalen House, they have to be up there. They're definitely top 5. Between Jamal, they're currently, I believe, 12-1, New Mexico. How many games do you think those 3 guards have all played together?
I know it's not a lot. I think I saw someone brought this up a few weeks ago. Probably 2 games.
1.
Yeah, I knew it was really low. Yeah.
And I believe it was their season opener against Texas Southern, who
that makes sense.
Obviously isn't premier game or anything, but they did win by 37 for what that's worth.
Yep.
But New Mexico, I was a little worried given the strength of the non-con schedule, but I plugged around with the numbers and bought Torvik, assuming they even go, let's say 12-6 in conference play. That's more than adequate enough in the Mountain West to get them in that large bid. But yeah, I mean, it's funny that you mentioned the Mountain West because yes, they needed to win a meaningful game in the tournament. Obviously, their lack of postseason success in terms of the March Madness is staggering, aside from San Diego. Even if you take out San Diego State's run last year to the national championship, I believe they're the only team in the Mountain West to win a March Madness game last year.
You're right.
So we're going on 3 years now where they might be a 4 to 5 bid league, and aside from one San Diego State run, really have a lack of success. I do think the table's going to turn in that aspect. I just think those teams are too well coached to have the streak continue. I think it's honestly more fluky than anything else in terms of them not being that successful. But yeah, that's my number one in terms of wanting to see New Mexico as a serious threat. Like if they are, let's say, like a 10 seed in the tournament, I think they're pretty terrifying 10 seed. New Mexico specifically.
I mean, if they win, and look, this is where I defer to my folks and friends in the bracketology space, but I don't understand why they couldn't be. Why would they be a 10, right? Like, because Utah State last year was a 10, I guess. Similar resume if they don't have a consistent Mountain West play. Okay, yeah, probably. So they're basically going to be a 7 to a 10. We know they're going to be somewhere in there. Again, that's kind of where I defer to bracketology.
That Utah State team, that Utah State team that was a 10 seed last year had 2 quad 4 losses.
That's a good point.
So
this is why I defer to bracketology, folks. I try to keep up with all this stuff tough, and I know you're good at that. So that's why I'm like, look. And I was trying to figure out where you were landing the plane on the resolution, and then you're like, well, New Mexico is basically, they've got to do something in this tournament, and that's perfect. That's a perfect way to lay out the first resolution, because the fact that the San Diego State's run, like you said, you took that out of it. There's really no meaningful postseason success, right? You alluded to that. The fact that just shows you, some people, I guess the counterpoint would be the the Mountain West is such a strong league in the regular season, but it's not ever going to be something of value other than San Diego State. And look, not getting Washington State, this is completely unrelated, but not getting Washington State and not getting Oregon State, unless I'm correct, they ended up going to the Mountain West. Is that right?
They went to the West Coast Conference.
Right. Okay. So then I'm making sure I had that right. So not getting them even more so is going to make this year even more important for the Mountain West future. And the fact that it hinges on New Mexico it's kind of sucks. Like, it really does, because I think there are 5 quality teams in that conference, and Boise State obviously not off to the greatest start of that they expected. Obviously, they had some tough losses against like Clemson and some others, but yeah, I love that. I love the Mountain West. I know that there are people like you and me out there that really enjoy the Mountain West, because especially of the time zone being in the East Coast, it's you're going to catch 90% of their games if you're up late, so you might as well watch them. And I love that you brought it up.
The other reason I think, and again, I don't want to be stuck on the Mountain West this whole episode, but they need to have postseason success, because they have a lot of coaches that are ready to make the jump to like a high major job.
That's a good point.
Like Nico Medved, I think, is bound for either Colorado, or I think he's a Minnesota alumnus or alumni.
I think you're right.
Ryan Dutcher spent 8 years on Michigan's bench at one point with everything going to Juwan Howard. It wouldn't shock me if they looked at Brian. Brian Dutcher's also a Minnesota alumnus, ironically enough. So they have those 2 coaches from the Mountain West if they decide to go either route. Even Danny Sprinkle, what he's doing with Utah State is pretty miraculous. I think a lot of those coaches, Alford, I think could easily, he's an Indiana alumni. We actually did a 3-part episode with Julian Mendenson on basically predicting where these coaches could, and basically it was in 5 years who's coaching every major program. And we went through every major program talking about who could be the coach there. And the Mountain West is one of like all these guys could make a jump as early as this year. And I think these guys need to have some type of success in order to, help make that jump.
There's even some instances like, where like Richard Pitino, right, who has made the jump back down to the Mountain West, and it's a good situation. You mentioned New Mexico, that's why I brought him up. But you see this, it ends up being this like proving ground for a lot of guys. I love how we went 7.5 minutes on the Mountain West and didn't bring up Colorado State once, right? And they've been probably the second best they've probably been the second best team in the Mountain West this year so far.
Maybe the best.
Arguably the best, right? And I'm giving San Diego State some credit there. Yeah, look, I'm glad you gave me a good one with the Mountain West to start, and you brought up Utah State, and I'll kind of give you a nice segue, right? I want to give you one that I think is, when I did the research for it, it was almost glaring to not like. And look, they're a topic of conversation. They're in the Big East, right? But Utah State obviously lost a lot of their minutes last year. One of those guys being Stephen Ashworth, right? Really, really big, contributor for them last year. I have a New Year's resolution for his new team, and it's Creighton, right? I want to talk about the Big East for a few minutes, right? And hopefully I got Ashworth correct there on the transfer, obviously, but 99% sure I did. I didn't look it up. I assumed I was right. Creighton needs to figure out a way to win when Stephen Ashworth isn't making shots. So I have a couple things for you, and that's just basically the headline for it. In the loss versus UNLV for Creighton, he had 2 points. He was 0 for 3 from the field, 0 for 2 from 3. Loss versus Colorado State, Mountain West team we just talked about. He had 8 points, 2 for 7 from the field, 2 of 5 from 3. Loss versus Villanova, 9 points, 2 of 8 from the field, 2 of 7 from 3. Loss versus Marquette, 3 points, 1 of 6 from the field, and 1 of 6 from 3. And then their 3-point win versus Alabama, so could have gone either way. He had 12 points, best showing of any of those results, 3 of 7 from the field, 2 of 6 from 3. I don't have the answer on how this resolution comes to fruition. Of course, it's just sometimes as simple as making shots, but Creighton can't win consistently if Stephen Ashworth is not making shots.
Do you have his assist numbers in those games?
I can. I don't in front of me. I probably should have, but I can.
Basically, here's why I asked. Because, not that I'm saying I disagree with that, in terms of Ashworth needing to make shots for Creighton to win, but between Baylor Shireman, between Trey Alexander, between Kalkbrenner, I think they have enough guys that they may not need Ashworth to, have an effective scoring day to win. But I think they definitely need Ashworth to be more of the facilitator on games where he's not making shots. That's sort of why I asked if you have his assist numbers pulled up.
I do. At UNLV, 3 assists. Win against Alabama, like I said, 3-point win, 1 assist. Lost to Villanova, 3 assists, and then Marquette was the high of those. It's 5, and then that Colorado State loss, he had 3.
So that's kind of, I think, where we split the difference. I think you could, as Creighton, win games if Ashworth's having an off night or an off game. But if he's not able to distribute the ball, Creighton, that's the big issue. They don't have a true point guard.
I love Trey Alexander, though. Why can't it be Trey Alexander is my problem. Like, I love him, and I love that little mid-range spot that he gets to, and it creates such a mismatch where they have to play down with Kalkbrenner, or you can keep, they go under a screen, he can go down on it. He's open 90% of the time in that mid-range area, right? And I'm just surprised he's not more of a playmaker. And look, I tried to kind of go outside the box for this, and I know as dumb as it sounds, it's as simple as he's just when he doesn't score or not even score, he's having a down 3-point shooting year. That is what it is, right? He's a career 40% free 3-point shooter. He's shooting 35%, which doesn't seem drastic, but when you lay out their 5 biggest games of this year, other than the Iowa game, which was so early in the year, I almost just threw out the result. For what it's worth, I think he had like 12. So it's not like, he even had this like standout shot kind of game as well. But in their 5 most meaningful results, 4 of them are losses. 1 of them is a 3-point win, and he was a non-factor in almost all of them. So it's just like, I know that their offense is sometimes too simplified with Shireman leading them in almost every major statistical category, points and rebounds. But he's so dynamic, and he was going to be one of the biggest reasons Creighton's offense didn't lose anything with Nembhard, and it's produced 5 really, really big losses that I think could really hurt their resume, at least.
Yeah, no, I get it. And Creighton, sort of, they're 0-2 in Big East play, I assume.
Yep.
Right now, yeah, because they lost to Villanova, they lost to Marquette. They're also, ironically enough, 0-2 against Mountain West teams. But
I told you I tried to segue it for us. I tried to keep it rolling just as easy, but that was an accident, actually.
Yeah, but they sort of remind me of, like, I don't want to compare them to last year's UConn team, because obviously last year's UConn team won it all. But, like,
yeah. Do
you remember the point where UConn lost like 5 or 6 in Big East play? Then all of a sudden they go into the tournament as a 4 seed. They were the best team in the nation before conference play, UConn last year. When they started, I believe, 13-0.
Then Creighton did the same thing. They lost their first 5 without Kalkbrenner. And then they got a 6 seed, and then they went on to the Elite Eight. So I mean, it's not like Creighton can't do it. But
Yeah,
this year
so,
they have Cockprinter. They have him healthy.
yeah. So as long as Ashworth, we talked about 35% now. That's not drastic compared to 40%. If he heats up sometime in February and plays like that through March, I think Creighton will be just fine.
Look, they're still 17th in KenPom. They obviously have a lot of like. I've watched enough Creighton to be like, okay, I'm not saying I'm getting fooled here twice. Fool me once, shame on you, whatever, right from last year. But they don't exactly have. They already played Villanova and Marquette. Those are two really hard Big East games, right? The next few: Georgetown, Providence, DePaul, St. John's, UConn, Seton Hall. That's the next 6. They have some opportunities to get right there, right? But they also have to play some really solid defenses in Connecticut, and I think Providence's defense has been really good this year. So, I'm not saying the jury's out on Creighton by any stretch of the imagination. I said 2 weeks ago it was their Big East to lose, and obviously that's shifted completely. At this point, I think it's anyone's Big East to win. So, give me your next one, unless you have anything else on Creighton.
Creighton, I was just going to add 7 of the final 9 games as of now were quad 1 games. So I think we're going to really see what kind of damage Creighton can do in the tournament in those stretch of 9 games.
Okay.
Let's stick in the Big East here.
Okay.
My second resolution is I really want to see an Arizona versus UConn national championship.
Say that again for me. Make sure I understood it.
Arizona and UConn in the national championship.
Okay.
So I suppose my resolution will be those two teams finding a way to get there.
Okay.
I know Arizona just lost to FAU, and then they suffered a bad loss to Stanford yesterday.
Stanford couldn't miss. I mean, that was you put up 100 or whatever it was like 99, right? 99 or 100. I saw it. I had to go back and watch it, but you put up like that. You're just not going to win that game.
So I suppose why I want to see that UConn and Arizona game is because, one, we already saw Arizona-Purdue, which was obviously a hell of a game. Yep. We saw Arizona in a dogfight with FAU, who I know they have two quad 4 losses, but that was a hell of a game. Arizona at their best and UConn at their best, I believe, are the 2 best teams in the country. They both have like I saw UConn twice at the Garden this year. I saw them for the Empire Classic, and I saw them for the Jimmy V Classic. Those fans filled up the Garden. That I've never been to a Knicks game in the MSG, but everything I envisioned a Knicks game being an MSG was what UConn fans provided in terms of energy. And I'm just watching, Cam Spencer talking smack to Amado Baycott. And both of those teams just have that, not only that FU factor, but the way Dan Hurley coaches, the way Tommy Lloyd coaches. Those 2 programs, every single game are going into this game knowing they are better than you. Flat out. They both know we are the better team in this game, and we are going to win this game. And I want to see that matchup so badly.
I think now that you I don't necessarily think there's anything for me to comment about the resolution. I think they just have to obviously be matched up opposite ends of things, and they just have to find their way there, right? I do think they're the 2 best teams in the country. I think I agree with you. I had hesitation a few weeks ago where Purdue was still the number 1 team in the country, and people are who are you going to put second? And I don't know. I'm so out of touch with the polls. I haven't done one the last 2 weeks of the holidays really, but I think if I were to just completely just go off my own opinion, you know how the AP ends up being result based a ton, and it should be, but sometimes it's what we think of these teams. I would probably go UConn 1 and Arizona 2 right now. So I think I agree in that aspect. I think the thing that caught my attention more from that blurb was that you've never been to a Knicks game in the Garden. That was my first ever NBA game, and I was in my 20s, which was so that's early 20s, I guess. But for me, that'll never be something I can ever live down, as that was my first ever game in the Garden there. But I will back you up on the fact that UConn fans travel. People know that. But I was in NRG last year for the Final Four, and they were there everywhere. It was I made the comment about, I'm actually wearing the shirt, the Charleston Classic. Dayton fans travel. I think it's UConn fans and Dayton fans in that order. 1, 2 in the entire country of fans that travel, and I will stand by that after what I've seen in the last year and a half covering college basketball. So, what is Arizona's? I guess as a team, I'll ask you this, because UConn I feel less stressed about asking this question. What will be Arizona's downfall? We know you mentioned the Stanford loss. Throw that out the window for a second, right? They lost to Princeton last year in the tournament, in a tournament that they very well could have won the national championship. What is Arizona's New Year's resolution as a team that they have to do to prevent another Princeton type result?
So Arizona, last time I looked, they were top 10 in KenPom offense and defense.
I believe that is correct. Yep, eight offense, 7 defense.
If you look at the 3 losses this year to Purdue, FAU, and Stanford, they're giving up on average 96 points a game in those 3 losses. So that's my concern is if they can't stop anybody. I know Stanford yesterday. I didn't get to watch that game because I was busy with New Year's Eve. But as you said, Stanford couldn't miss, just looking at the shooting numbers. FAU, yes, they gave them 96 points. That was in double overtime, though, so that is a little skewed. And then Purdue, 92 points. Again, Purdue is a juggernaut of an offense. But I guess that would be my concern in terms of in order to win 5 games in March Madness to get to the national championship, to even have this opportunity to happen, are they going to be able to defend adequately?
That's spot on to what I had. So I was seeing if we landed on the same conclusion, and we did. Their 3 losses, like, again, the Stanford thing, I say throw it out the window, right? But, like, the Florida Atlantic game went into 2 overtimes. Purdue, that was the best performance that, Smith and Lawyer had all year together, basically up until that point. And then their wins outside of that, like, I look at that Duke result now. I know it was early, and I understand it was the second game of the year, November 10th, the whole thing, right? But it's at Cameron, and we now know enough about Duke's offense that I don't think that was Arizona's defense. Because I did plenty of pods after that game or right after that game and talking about, like, I was really impressed by the physicality. It's like, looking back on it, I don't know. I think that was just both teams' offense hadn't seen a lot yet, and I think we can kind of throw that result out the window almost a little bit from what we learned about those teams a month and a half later. So, give me your next one. I've got 2 more we'll do quickly later.
Okay. And real quick, for what it's worth, they did hold Alabama to 74 points, and we know Alabama just about one of the most proficient offenses in college basketball. But they won that game. So, as I said, as long as they're able to keep a team like Alabama to 74 points, then odds are I think they should just about be the favorite for the national championship. Okay, give me 1 second. I lost it here. Okay, here we go. Next New Year's resolution I had, this is the one I think I feel the most passionate about.
Okay.
In terms of, I'm not going to say the specific conferences. I'm hoping for a minimal amount of bid stealers for March Madness this year. And I did single out a few teams that I'm dying to see in the tournaments. Grand Canyon is, I think, one of the best mid-majors we've seen in a long time. I mean, I don't think people realize how freaking good Grand Canyon is this year. They're the Cinderella team, I think. Like, they could do serious damage in March. So I would be devastated if they specifically don't get in the tournaments. Other teams I have, UC Santa Barbara, I love. I know they've been off to a rough start. I believe they're 0-2 in Big West play right now. Indiana State and Drake, I'm interested to see if the Missouri Valley could become a 2-big league, but I definitely want to see Indiana State in there. Then UNC Wilmington, Princeton, James Madison, and McNeese. I mean, I don't remember in college basketball there being this many, like, legitimately good mid-majors.
Give me the last few. I heard UNCW, Princeton. Make sure I got them all.
James Madison.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And McNeese, I think, is the other one other than Grand Canyon. Like, Will Wade has those guys playing.
Okay. So this is where, even though I don't feel like I'm an expert in bracketology, I am going to tell you, like, I'm complete agreement in all these. You can throw Drake out the window because I think Indiana State's probably going to win the conference regardless. I think that probably works itself out, in my opinion. Yeah. The CAA last year, at one point, I felt like if those teams just kept beating each other up the way they did, I would have been like, you know what, put all 4 of them in the tournament and let one of them figure it out. Because I feel like any 4 of those top CAA teams last year, And for recap, I believe that was Hofstra, UNCW, Charleston, who ended up making it. And I believe it was Drexel last year, or Towson, one of those guys. Probably the top 5. Let's just call it the top 5. It is what it is. Pat Scary's got a good team too. At that point, I'm like, look, I've seen enough of this team, especially this year, that, look, I don't even know what point I'm trying to make, but like, I'm trying to figure out a way for the Sun Belt to be a 2-bid league, right? That was kind of my alternative to your Missouri Valley part. I saw App State beat Auburn at App State a couple weeks ago, and that was, I mean, I was like, I'm in. Like, let JMU run the table, Wichita State style a few years ago, and App State win the tournament. I know resumes come into play, but why the hell aren't both of those teams in?
I was just going to ask that. I said, if a team other than James Madison wins the conference tournament, does James Madison get an at-large bid? And I say that answer is most likely yes.
If they run the table otherwise, yeah. My issue is it's so unlikely because they'll still play. I think they still play App one more time in like mid-February. I'd have to look at that. Actually, I'll pull it up right now just to make sure I'm not talking from the hip. But where does KenPom have James Madison anyway? There they are, 63rd. James Madison plays App State. I was kind of close. They're projected to win by 1 at home against App State on January 27th. That is a Saturday game. That should be an incredible game, and I don't think they play them again. Oh, they do. They play them January 13th in a few weeks. It doesn't say when. It does. Home on the 13th, away on the 27th. I thought they had played for some reason at this point. They're on the nation's longest active win streak. I know the Michigan State game is not going to age well or has not aged well, even though Michigan State's been better. I'm trying to figure out like the way. So I watched that GCU San Diego State game live, the entire second half, and I'm in agreement with you. I think if they're not in the tournament, it's a travesty.
Let me ask you about McNeese real quick.
Okay.
Because McNeese, I'm looking on their resume right now. They're 0-1 in Quad 1 games, which was a loss to Louisiana Tech. They're 2-1 in Quad 2 that wins over VCU and Michigan. Obviously, they beat Michigan the other night. Now that conference play starting, every single game they have is a Quad 4 game, except for one, which is Quad 3. So every game they'll play the rest of the year is a Quad 4 game as of now. How can you potentially, if they don't win the conference tournament, how can you justify giving them an at-large bid if they don't win the conference tournament?
You can't.
I just don't. Love to see them in, but you can't justify it when over half. And they played 4 non-D1 games that they all won, and they're already 5-0 in Quads 3 and 4. So the majority of their games are going to be all but 4 or Quad 3 and Quad 4 games. Majority Quad 4.
Look, anything can happen at some of these levels, but I guess the point I would make is like, and this is not exactly a Southland Conference centric podcast, but are they not the best team in their conference?
Oh, they
11-2. Yeah, anything can happen, right? Corpus Christi made it last year. I believe A&M Commerce made it a few years ago. Like, anything can happen, obviously, but they're the best team with the best coach, and barring a random result in their conference tournament, they're in probably. I guess the grab bag would be, right, we have one of Indiana State, Drake, like I said, would have to make it. So Indiana State's in my opinion. UNCW, like, we didn't even talk about any of the other CAA teams, and like I think I'll have a chance to see UNCW this year. I think so. I think they're coming to Campbell. I think it's UNCW and Charleston that Campbell plays. For those who don't know, I cover the Camels for House College Hoops because they're literally out my back window. I can walk to the arena. But UNCW, I believe, is one of the home and away CAA games. Every CAA team gets 2 teams they play home and away. I thought was a cool nugget I learned this year. I forgot all about that. They're definitely in. I think if they, it's going to be really difficult, but their defense, they're the best defense in the conference. I know Charleston, that's a slight to some of those guys, but you would have to get UNCW in. I think Princeton, I don't even know if the Ivy League, I don't even know what resolution I'm trying to come to here, but I mean, is Princeton the shoe-in to win the Ivy? Because you're not going to get 2 out of the Ivy either, right?
But Yale's pretty damn good themselves.
So I guess the point you're basically saying that these are the teams that you better pray there's no bid still.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
I mean, UNC Wilmington, we saw them beat Kentucky. Grand Canyon, same thing. I'm looking at their resume.
It's them and Tarleton State. WCC Hoops has been on this for months. I mean, he was tweeting about this in May and June. Like that, it was these 2 teams, and GCU was probably the better of the 2 coming into the year anyway.
Well, Grand Canyon's 4-1 in quads 1 and 2. Same thing with their resume. They have one more quad 2 opportunity. Everything else is quad 3 and quad 4. So they're going to have a tough time if they don't win their conference tournaments to get an at-large bid. But how can you not give them an at-large bid? If, like, I think they're clearly one of the 68 best teams in the country.
Yeah, that's where I kind of defer to how the system is relatively flawed even now. All right. So the ultimate resolution there was these teams' resolution is they don't need to have bids still in their conference, essentially.
For all those teams specifically that I named, I want to see them in the tournament. So their resolutions are to win the conference tournaments, essentially.
There you go.
There's none of them really in 2 bid leagues.
All right. I'll give you one quickly that I don't have an answer for, and I doubt you will either. Virginia's New Year's resolution is to come up with a way to score the ball on offense. As crazy as that sounds, that's exactly what I wrote down. They're 361st, which, if I'm correct, is dead last in tempo. And they're 306th in percentage of, let me make sure I read this right, percentage of points from free throws per game. So they're not getting to the free throw line. They're not scoring it when they get there. And Virginia just cannot generate offense. And I know Ryan Dunn's an incredible defensive player, converting a lot of those transition opportunities if they do get them. But you're dead last in tempo. And the way the ACC is set up this year, I just don't see a recipe where Virginia, like, they're going to lose some more games in the ACC. I know they lost that really bad one to Notre Dame a few days ago. I mean, that just is glaringly eye-opening, right, to lose to Notre Dame. But Virginia has a real problem, and it's been a problem in the past, and Tony Bennett's figured it out. But this feels like DEFCON 3, I would say. Anything there for Virginia?
So, yeah, sorry, I'm pulling up the resume.
No, you're good.
So, I don't know, because hasn't this kind of been Virginia's thing, like, forever, in terms of not being able to score the ball? That just relying on elite defense? And, again, I'm looking at their 3 losses. Notre Dame, they only scored 54. Memphis, they only scored 54. Wisconsin, they only scored 41. And all the wins, they have 80, 73, 80, 62, 56, 59. So their 3 lowest scoring games this year are the 3 games they lost. Every game where they scored above 54, they won. Any game that or less, they lost. So
it fits the bill, though. They're second in the country in scoring defense at 56.2 a game.
Yeah.
So I mean, it fits the bill of exactly what you just laid out. Mm-hmm. From what I've watched, there's not enough true shot creation, and I know that Ryan Dunn, like, that was a big thing coming into the year, was he was this pretty pick for a lot of these, NBA draft things and ACC Defensive Player of the Year picks, but, like, he can't be the only person. And McNeely, and let me not slight him in any way, has had a really good offensive season as well, but they don't have enough shot creation where I can't rely on Beekman to make a single play on offense that gets them a quality shot. And that's not a slight to Beekman in any way. It's just that's not an offense that's going to win you. Like, look, I'm looking at a situation where, like, they're upset in, like, the second round of the ACC tournament. And at that point, their resume will have to speak for itself, and they're going to have to rattle off these wins here in at least a couple of these big conference games, because obviously playing in Virginia is really, really difficult, and that's going to be a really big help for them, like when they bring Duke to town and things like that. But it just feels worse than normal, and I don't have anything to back it up. This is more of my gut and my eye test, but it just feels really, really, really worse than normal. I don't know.
Yeah. Now, in terms of answering your question, I don't think they have an immediate solution on this roster in order to fix that problem, at least for this year. And it's not like they're heavy in the transfer portal either to fix it in upcoming years.
All right, give me your next one, because I've got one more that I don't think is it's been a conversation that's been brought up, but I want to see, it's more of a question to you than anything. So give me your next one or last one, whatever you got.
So I have Mississippi State. Obviously, they have Tolu Smith back now. He made his debut yesterday.
Good. Yep.
They need to find a way to hit threes. They, last season, were dead last in the country in 3-point percentage, and I believe they're second or third to last in the country in free throw percentage. They just could not shoot the ball. They were a good team last year. They started out 1-7 in SEC play and still made the conference tournament as one of the last 4 in, or the NCAA tournament as one of the last 4 in. But I came into this year absolutely adoring this Mississippi State team. I actually just went to the Gotham Classic, which was Mississippi State and Rutgers, and during the press conference, I got to ask Coach Chris Jans, what does that say about your team that, you got all 5 starters back on a team that went to the NCAA tournament last year, given what the transfer portal is today. And just the fact that they got all 5 starters back. Their leading scorer, Josh Hubbard, is a 5'10 freshman who initially committed to Ole Miss and then ended up in Mississippi State. And they didn't have him last year. He's a legitimate 40% three-point shooter so far. They got Jimmy Bell from West Virginia as a transfer who previously played at St. Louis. So this team not only got all 5 starters back, but they found a way to get better from last year too. I think they're probably either the third, I guess I would say the 4th best team in the SEC right now. But I think if they find a way to even shoot consistently, maybe 33% from 3 as a team, with Torrey Smith back, I think they're a legitimate Final Four contender. They already have an elite defense. They have an elite defense. If they could just get the ball, shoot it at 33% as a team, that's the case for the recipe they need to make a serious run in the tournament.
I think they get him back any later. I think there's a real problem. But I think the fact that they're able to take advantage of some continuity and the fact that, like you said, the starters are back completely. Hubbard coming into, I guess this is before last night's game or whatever game Tula Smith was back because it doesn't have his stats recorded here on Sports Reference. But Hubbard, 0 starts this year, averaging 14.8 points per game. And you were almost nail on the head with 40%. He's 38.8% from 3, which is basically 40%. I don't know about Final Four, but they're definitely a team that has a combination. If they can start to become more consistent from 3, like you said, for 34% for Deshaun Davis, 36% from Shaquille Moore, but only on 1.9 attempts. Basically, anybody that's taking a significant amount of attempts is below 30%. So I think it's spot on. Again, I'm going to lean against the Final Four part of that, but I like the confidence in it. They are still pretty far down in three-point percentage, 296th in the country at 30.6%. But some of the SEC play, though, there are high caliber offenses in the SEC. Like, they do this against Kentucky, they're not going to win the game, just without a doubt, right? Yeah. But there are some offenses, like even Ole Miss, right? Like, they can slow this game down and put it inside to Taylor Smith and change the game and control it the way they want to. The problem is, can they, on the flip of a dime, or whatever you call that terminology, can they just say, hey, we're making shots tonight from 3 that's going to help us win this game in a meaningful way? Their defense will create a lot of offense for them, which is kind of I believe in them more from that aspect than I do for Virginia. So I kind of agree with a deeper tournament run if I put those two head to head. So I like that one a lot. All right. I have a question that's basically a New Year's resolution. That's just kind of the thing I want to close with. Do you have any more that rapid fire at me at the end here? Or was that your last one?
I will say I'd also like to see Western Carolina win the SoCon, but the SoCon's pretty loaded this year, actually. So as much as I want to see Vontavious Woldray, become a March Madness darling, essentially. So when I talked about, limited amount of bid stealers, I don't even know if they have a bid to be stolen. I mean, they're good, but with how good the SoCon is, I think any of the top 4 teams could win it. So, yeah, that's just the final point I will make in terms of the mid-majors I wanted to discuss today.
Yeah, UNC Greensboro, I'm going to keep I'm going to hammer that continuously. I'm not going to back down from that because that was what I had coming into the year, and that win at Arkansas obviously speaks for itself. Yep. So, even if it is in November. All right, this is more of a question, but I'll leave with the resolution, and then we'll kind of talk about it. Since you especially, I know you brought up a lot of the resume stuff today, where a lot of these quad games are, so I think you're prepared for this, even if I didn't tell you. Gonzaga's New Year's resolution is to figure out a way to not lose basically any more games in West Coast Conference play because they are at risk of missing the tournament.
Yep.
So, I guess the question is, on a scale of 1 to 10, I guess let's do this. Out of 100, 1 to 100%, how confident are you Gonzaga makes the tournament if they don't win the West Coast Conference?
27.
Okay, 27. I like that. All right. Now let's. I mean, look. I'm sure you got the resume already pulled up, or will in just a second. But I had someone reach out to me on Twitter and ask about this. Like, it's starting to be glaringly obvious that with the way the West Coast Conference is now, San Francisco and St. Mary's being good is going to help them if those guys continue to be good, which it seems like they are. A lot of people who are doing bracketology currently have San Francisco as the automatic qualifier. So I guess the question is, like, what can Gonzaga do? Because at this point, like, the offense is a shell of itself under Mark Few from what we've become to know. Obviously, we know under Timmy, that's something that's, we've always just felt like their offense was going to be fine because they had somebody as a reliable scorer and rebounder. But I guess what is the fix for Gonzaga, if there is any?
So when Ciro Ventos went down with, I believe it's a torn ACL, unfortunately,
Yeah.
I basically, that was my concern, is that Gonzaga just doesn't have the depth on they don't have the depth in general, but they definitely don't have the depth on the wing with Ventos out. So that was always my main concern coming into the year. I mean, in terms of what they could do to help themselves, they have 3 more quad 1 opportunities, one of them being at Kentucky February 10th. They need to find a way to win that game. If they lose that game to Kentucky, they just about need to win the West Coast Conference tournaments. I mean, the last 2 games of the season, last 2 regular season games, are at St. Fran and at St. Mary's. Those are currently slated as quad 1 games.
Those are going to be, if those two, that's what I was talking about earlier. Those two have to continue to win, or else those are going to be really bad games for them. The question that got brought up to me, and I'm glad that you clarified the Kentucky part, is if they lose that Kentucky game, or can they make the tournament if they don't win that Kentucky game, if they don't win the West Coast Conference? And my answer was no.
They would need to, let me see, they play Santa Clara twice, they play San Fran twice, and they play St. Mary's twice. They got to basically win all 6 of those games. If they go 5-1, maybe they get in. Maybe. But let me ask you, would you rather see if Gonzaga loses that game and then, let's say, St. Fran wins the West Coast Conference tournament, who would you rather see in the tournament, Gonzaga or Grand Canyon?
Grand Canyon, just because I know I've already seen them beat a caliber of team that's in the tournament. Gonzaga hasn't done that.
No, Gonzaga's 0-4 quad 1, 2-0 quad 2. And again, that Gonzaga, the way the schedule was set up, it was always, okay, they needed to rely on these other teams to be good. I mean, obviously in Maui, they lost to Purdue. Then they played Syracuse, who's right now not a tournament team. They beat UCLA, who's right now a quad 3 win. It would help if, UCLA ended up as a quad 2 win, but that doesn't look like that's going to happen. USC, same thing. They're substantially worse than what we anticipated them being. So, and then they have losses to Purdue, UConn, Washington, and San Diego State. So any opportunity they had to boost their resume for teams that haven't underachieved this year, they basically lost. And that's a major concern. And that's why, as of now, that's why you made this a resolution, because right now, with the resume, they're not really a tournament team.
Yeah. I'm in complete agreement, and this first time I had a chance to talk about it on a podcast, but it's been put out there many times that I think I first brought it up on ECB a few weeks ago. I was like, look, I just don't know what their resume is left other than that Kentucky game, and obviously West Coast Conference obviously has a couple of things that you just laid out. I wrote down Big Ten question mark because, and this will, I guess, be my parting thought with you. This is not exactly, I don't want to kick a conference while it's down, right? But the caliber of team in the Big Ten this year, right now, the top of the conference in conference order, I guess is the way it's marked. Illinois, Northwestern, Indiana, Wisconsin, Purdue, Nebraska, Ohio State. Those are probably your tournament teams as it stands right this moment, but that obviously will probably change, right? Indiana probably doesn't, come out with a couple of really strong wins there. You're probably going to see Purdue, Nebraska, Ohio State, Illinois. If the loss of Shannon until they figure that out, it's going to be. I'm going to not comment, but you're probably getting 5 teams in the tournament from Big Ten. So I don't really know what the resolution was, but I mean, it's the mid-10 right now, and I don't know how that changes.
So the Big Ten, surprisingly enough, I believe the last 2 or 3 NCAA tournaments have had the most bids of any conference. I think they had 9 each of the last 2 years.
This feels like a correction year.
Yes,
feels like a correction year.
They also, we're just about the Mountain West needing to have more success in the tournament. What about the Big Ten need more success in the tournament? They get 9 teams in and now get maybe one team to the Sweet 16, if that, the last few years.
Yep.
So, and if we're looking now at the Big Ten, who's currently, you just named the teams that probably get in, how many of those teams do you feel confident getting into the Sweet 16?
Well, assuming Shannon doesn't come back, let's just leave that on the table
Yes.
for the sake of there's not enough we know yet. So no. Northwestern, no. Indiana, probably not. Purdue, yes. Nebraska, maybe, but I haven't seen enough of them in Big Ten play yet. I don't like Wisconsin that much. It's probably Purdue and Ohio State. And I don't feel good about Ohio State.
I was going to say Purdue, Wisconsin, and maybe Ohio State is the third.
So 2.5 is basically what we've come to. We had 2 different third teams there. So, yeah, I don't know. Again, I don't have a resolution for the Big Ten, but it's something that needs to be monitored for sure. All right, let people know where they can find you. I appreciate the time today. On this, as we're recording this, we are in the middle of, I think it's Alabama, Michigan. You want to give us a score update really quick for those that are people listening to this 2 days later, but just curious. I know you said you were trying to watch it or keep up with it, but we're recording this in the middle of Alabama, Michigan.
To be honest, with everything going on my iPad in terms of pulling up the resumes and all, I haven't totally been engaged. But right now at halftime, it's 13-10 Michigan.
Nice. All right.
Well,
let people know where they can find you. Ats are on the screen. It'll also be in the description, anything you're working on, and then we'll get out of here.
So you guys can follow me on Twitter at @the_NBAGel. That's NBAGELL. Again, I'm host of the Bird Rights Podcast. You can follow Bird Rights Pod on Twitter, YouTube, TikTok. You can follow the One and Done Podcast, same places, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok. Instagram as well. And go rate, review, listen, Spotify, Apple, Google, wherever you get your podcast. Any feedback obviously is greatly appreciated. You could write to the mailbags, give us a mailbag question. If you're interested, DM me. We could talk further about that. And Trevor, again, thank you so much for having me on. I've been a voter in the Everything College Basketball poll. So obviously Phil Dexter, somebody I know you work closely with, has included me in that. So I'm just gracious as I've been in the NBA podcasting industry for a couple of years now, but you guys have welcomed me into college basketball as well with open arms, and it's greatly appreciated.
Of course. And look, if we don't do another podcast between now and then, probably sounds like we'll be seeing each other in Portsmouth. So I look forward to it if you'll be there. So thank you again for the time, and give Steven a follow and all the stuff you just mentioned. Links will also be in the description below. Thank you again for your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.